Welcome back to another edition of the Lucas Oil Online Race Report. Craig Hoffman, racing expert Scott Douglas. Good having you with us here at www.KentuckyAutomotorsports.com. And I know Halloween's coming past, but we held over our Lucas Oil pumpkin.
Pumpkins are a part of the Thanksgiving motif. Plus, look at that beautiful carving, that Lucas Oil logo. We got to keep that around.
Keep that around for Thanksgiving. How's that? It's a Thanksgiving. It goes from Halloween to Thanksgiving, but something.
Pumpkin bread going. Yeah,
hey, a lot of drivers may be giving thanks after Talladega, but then now they go into Texas. And remember, last year, years past, Jimmy Johnson, not one of his better tracks.
No, and this is a tough place. And of course, he hasn't needed it to be in years past, and we'll see how it all shakes down. But Texas is a tough place, big, fast racetrack.
Who do you like? I know you like the Roush drivers on tracks like this.
I like the Roush drivers in Texas, even though none of them are really, worried about the chase. But, you always got to look at Carl Edwards and Greg Biffle when you get to Texas, and maybe even Matt Kenseth.
Well, we're here on Kentucky Auto Motorsports, the television show in Louisville, Kentucky, every Thursday at midnight, Saturday at noon. And one thing we like to do is we like to have fun. We bring the biggest name drivers in here, like Dale Jarrett, Dario Franchitti, Dan Weldon, Sarah Fisher, Kenny Wallace, Scott Sharp. We've had 9-time ARCA champion Frank Kimmel. We bring them on the show.
That's right. And this is where you're going to see them. And, of course, on these last couple weeks, or coming up this week on our TV show, Darrell Waltrip's with us.
Yeah, Darrell Waltrip is sharing some time with us here and in the Lucas Oil Online Race Report. So right now, we thought we'd share some of that conversation with you. Kentucky Auto Motorsports pit stop. We talked to the biggest names on Kentucky Auto Motorsports. We haven't had
Scott. It doesn't get any bigger than DW here. Now, come on.
Well, I don't know. You two guys are pretty big in Kentucky.
Now, we had Michael on being inducted into the Hall of Fame earlier. It was a great evening, but you were inducted a number of years ago. But let's just talk about Darrell Waltrip. Yeah. I mean, I love watching you growing up. When I grew up in North Carolina, I love you in the booth. How can you top all that?
Well, I'm at the end of my career, so had to find another occupation. Couldn't drive anymore. Kind of got too old, they said, and so I had to find something else to do. So I ended up doing what you guys are doing, and I did learn one thing. It's a lot easier to be interviewed than it is to interview. It's easy. You ask me a question, I can go all night. You know that.
Yeah, we know that.
But when you've got to be the guy asking the questions, that's a hard job. Really is.
And they give you the assignment a lot of times of talking to a driver, and you know how focused he is.
Oh, yeah.
And you're on the radio with him, and you need to ask the right question, like right now.
Well, the guys in my ear, those guys, they're always saying, why don't you talk under caution? Or when the race is stopped, they say, why don't you talk to one of the drivers? I say, because they don't like it. And I've been there and I know what that's like. And it's like you said, you're so focused and you're so thinking about what am I going to do when we get back to racing, whether it's caution or red flag. So I don't like to break that concentration or, hey, say, Jeff, it's a DW. What the heck? What the heck? So I try to avoid it. I do it on the start of the race, but that's about it.
Now, I got to ask you, we here in Louisville, Kentuckyana, as we call it, we don't have all the drivers everywhere. Well, we got some names here I want to toss out at you. First one, Charging Charlie Gottsback.
Yeah, well, he made a little history for himself again at Bristol, a place where he had actually, I think, one of the few guys that ever won a caution-free race at Bristol.
That's right.
And Charlie said an interesting thing. He was in that Legends race.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a terrible accident.
Parsons, yeah.
Yeah, well, he ran into Larry Pearson.
Yeah.
Ran into Pearson's car there. And Charlie, of course, he got broken up pretty good. And I was hearing listening to an interview he's doing. He said, I'd never been to the hospital before. And then he started talking about scar tissue in it. Did you know you'd ever broken your back? Did you know you'd ever broken your neck? Did you ever know you'd broken all your ribs? He'd never been to the hospital before, but I think he needed to.
Then, wasn't it?
Obviously, he needed to go a number of times and just didn't.
Let me throw
No, as a matter of fact, you didn't want to go to the infield hospital care center. It was more treacherous getting there and getting out of the whatever kind of vehicle they had. I remember Buddy Baker told me they had an old Hearst that they were using for an ambulance.
Well, Andy Vertrees did that as a promotional stunt.
Well, this was for real.
That was for real.
And the guys got the gurney. They got Baker, big guy, got Baker up on the gurney, stuck him in the back of the hearse, and didn't tie him down. And they were racing at Maryville, Tennessee, a pretty high bank half-mile racetrack. When they went across the track and to go out the track, the gurney took off, hit the back door, and Baker rolled out of the back of the ambulance and back down the hill. got hurt worse falling out of the ambulance than he did in the car wreck. So you didn't want to go to infield care centers back in the day. You kind of avoided them.
Let me throw another name your way. We know there's ARCA champion Frank Kimmel here, but Bill Kimmel Sr. raced with a lot of the old guys years ago.
Oh, yeah, he used to come up to Whitesville there in Owensboro, and I used to come up here to the fairgrounds, and then we'd run into each other at different places, literally. And, of course, Bill always drove with a little cigar in his mouth. And he had an old Ford, you know, some old 56 Ford or something. He was one of those Ford guys. Him and Bill Clary and a bunch of old guys that used to race out of Louisville here, Harry Hyde. And I used to run into those guys all the time. And they might have a kind of crappy-looking old cars, but when they got them on the racetrack, those crappy old cars were hard to beat.
You mentioned these names, and I want to talk about that for a second, because really you and Danny Sullivan opened the door to this for a lot of the years, and we understand how racing, you know, had to work its way into mainstream, but for years racers weren't welcome at this function, and it's great that now Michael's in, and there's been a lot of talk that Harry Hyde's a guy who hopefully will someday be honored here as well.
Yeah, I think he should be. Harry was he's an innovative guy. You know, I think people that raced with him when he was here in Louisville back in the 60s will tell you at the fairgrounds he was pretty creative. And, of course, who cannot forget, you know, the beautiful 71 K&K Dodge Charger that Bobby Isaac drove and Baker drove, and Harry was the crew chief. And then, of course, with Tim Richmond, Days of Thunder, Harry Hogg. You know, that's Harry Hyde, actually. And so Harry certainly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame here in Kentucky. I think I may have been the first race car driver that they inducted back in 2001, I believe it was, or 2, I can't remember. But that was a big honor, and I'll tell you why. The night I was there, they were re-inducting Muhammad Ali.
That's right.
And I was there, and of course, I was a huge Cassius Clay fan. You know, growing up in Owensboro, and I came out of that same era, and I felt like I could float like a butterfly and drive drive you crazy like a bee. That was me, you know. So I had a lot of admiration for Muhammad, and of course, you know, he came in and he didn't say a word. And I'll tell you this because it's such a contrast. Here's a guy that was known as the Louisville Lip, and always running his mouth and getting attention that way. And that night, in a room much bigger than this, he walked into the room and it went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. And I just thought, what a contrast between when he was a young man and how he got attention. And here he is a number of years later, walks into a room and doesn't have to say a word. No. And everybody just, their jaw dropped. And I got to sit at the dais beside of him and up on the head table beside of him, and sat there, and he knew about racing. I got his autograph. It was quite, getting inducted in the Hall of Fame was pretty cool. But sitting beside Muhammad Ali as he was getting inducted was even cooler.
Well, another Kentuckiana Motorsports with a legend of NASCAR, Darrell Waltrip, Kentuckiana Motorsports. I tell you, really a good fun time with that. Your thoughts? He did not make it into the second class into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, but he'll be in next year
I
probably.
think you can bank it. He'll be in the next class with so will Cale Yarborough. I mean, those are the two guys now that seem to lead the next batch that's going to go in the Hall of Fame.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that. More of Darrell Waltrip in the weeks ahead on Kentuckiana Motorsports and our Lucas Oil Online Report Pit Stop. Hey, got to tell you, Lucas Oil products made in America.
And they're sold to the world.
We'll see you next time. Enjoy the racing, everyone.